Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dr. Jeff Boehm. I'm the CEO of the Marine Mammal Center. Our center, headquarters in Sausalito, California, is the largest marine mammal teaching hospital in the world. And it is also the site from which we conduct and live out our conservation commitment. This is the first in our ocean policy webinar series. You see, we're at a pivotal time for action for the environment. We want these webinars to inspire problem solving, to protect our ocean and marine mammal wildlife, of course, but we want to do more. We also want to address immense issues of climate change and environmental justice. I want to genuinely thank our panelists today. We're very privileged and honored to have from the state of Washington, Governor Inslee, from California, Congressmember Bass and Congressmember Huffman. And moderating our discussion today, we're delighted to have Carol Costello, former host of CNN Newsroom and an award-winning journalist who has interviewed 4 presidents. Today, she teaches journalism at Loyola Marymount University and is independently producing podcasts. Thank you all for joining us. Carol, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I was lucky to witness the Marine Mammal Center's efforts during the Gulf oil spill in 2010. And as I watched the scientists there rescuing these animals who were covered with oil, I cried. And then I was heartened because I knew their research had already begun on how that oil spill affected the environment. So thank you, Jeff, for all that the center does. It's so very important. I'd also like to welcome all of you this morning. Our focus today is what the election means for climate change. And the Marine Mammal Center is smart to focus on this because it just completed this big study, and that made national news. Actually, it made news all over the world. They found that sea lions were getting this mystery form of cancer. Think about that, sea lions getting cancer. That's very unusual in the wild for any animal to get cancer. After decades of study, scientists at the Marine Mammal Center figured out what happened. It was because of these toxic chemicals in our oceans that had been there for decades. So now you know what to do about that. So this is a very important discussion to have. And, there are hopeful signs. I don't want to be totally pessimistic because there are hopeful signs, namely an administration willing to embrace climate change and policies that actually do something about it. But the challenges are great. So this is an important conversation. I'm going to kick things off with some opening comments from our panelists, each of whom is an expert on legislation and politics and climate change and what's wrong with our oceans. And then I'm going to ask them questions for about 20 minutes. And then I would like you to submit questions of your own in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. And for 20 minutes, I will ask your questions. So as you think of them throughout this talk, please post those questions at the bottom of your screen and we'll get to as many as possible. So let's get right to it. I want to reintroduce our guests in more depth. First of all, Governor Jay Inslee, Washington State, welcome. As the governor of Washington, the governor has prioritized tackling climate change, advancing clean energy, and protecting ocean health. Under Inslee's leadership, Washington adopted groundbreaking climate policies and the first ever comprehensive ocean acidification plan. I'd also like to welcome Congressmember Karen Bass. Bass served as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and is serving on the Judiciary Committee, and she's done that since 2012. Congressmember Bass has also co-sponsored the Environmental Just for All Act, which seeks to restore, reaffirm, and reconcile environmental justice and civil rights. Welcome. We'd also like to welcome Congressmember Jared Huffman. Congressman Huffman has built a reputation as a progressive leader and an environmental expert. He's been instrumental in defending America's coastlines from offshore oil and gas drilling, introducing legislation to protect the Pacific and Arctic oceans as part of a coordinated nationwide effort to protect oceanic ecosystems and coastal economies while reducing our unhealthy dependency on fossil fuels. Thanks to all of you. And I just want to say, as I ask questions of each of you, if any of you wants to join in and answer the question too, please do that, because I'd rather this evolve as kind of a conversation instead of a stilted Q&A session. So with that, let's go. First question to you, Governor Inslee. You've celebrated President Biden's recent executive actions, but they only last 4 years, depending, right? So how do you think we get to legislation that can withstand the change of administrations and prevent the next administration from reversing those actions?
Well, first off, thanks for having me. I'm great to be with two members of our House representatives who are doing such great work. It's just a thrill to see what they're doing. And they now have a tremendous field to run on with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in a position. Look, I have some good news and bad news. The bad news is you don't win any of these battles just one time. You have to win them every single day. So your question is, how do we do something good that lasts? We get up every single morning dedicated to this task. And the good news is we can do that. And at some point, Joe Biden will be in another adventure. But after that, we'll have to get up the next morning and fight these battles again. And there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, this is a great time to be alive, because with all the challenges we have, it's a time where you can really make a difference. So my answer to that question is, now I would like to eliminate the filibuster so that these two members of the U.S. Congress can get more done. And I hope that our senators can consider that. But even if that does not happen through reconciliation, we know we can do good things. And I got to tell you, I am so delighted by President Biden's early action on the executive front. He has hit on every cylinder. He's touched every base. He's been fast. He's been early, and he's been smart. So I am very excited about the next several years. But even after that, you're just going to have to fight these battles again. And I know we can win them, because that is our destiny. And I want to thank the Marine Mammal group here, what you're doing. I got started in this when I was 5, seeing a killer whale going around my boat in the fog. And when you hear a killer whale, they used to call them killer whales, of course. When you hear them breathe, that's a sound I want my grandchildren to be able to hear. So thanks to everybody on this call for working on this.
I love your optimism, Governor. I really do. But Congressmember Bass, I mean, when you think about it, the Trump administration has dismantled more than 100 environmental rules. He shrunk our national monuments. He's opened pristine land to drilling. Isn't it going to take a long time, an immense effort to reverse these things?
Well, I do think it's going to take a long time, especially because we're still in the middle of a pandemic that we haven't gotten a handle on. And we have to understand that the first order, second order, and third order of business is about COVID. And so I think that never before in our lifetime would we have ever imagined that one president could do the damage that he did. And so there is a lot of damage to repair. But what I'm excited about is that we have an administration that understands science. Science should drive what we do, and not just running after whatever financial interest guides us in a particular direction. Let me congratulate you for the work that you're doing at the Marine Mammal Center. And one of these days, I would love to come and visit a teaching hospital for mammals. As somebody that loves the ocean, I'm an LA girl. I grew up by the ocean. I love to bike ride by the ocean. It's very important to me. And then the idea of being on a panel with two just esteemed environmental leaders. Indirectly, I know of the governor's work and what he's done over the years. And I am very proud to have a colleague like Representative Huffman, who we met each other in Sacramento, where he was a leader in our state on environmental issues. And now to see him lead on a national level. So I feel like we're in good hands. We have the White House, the Senate, and the House, and it's our opportunity now to set the record straight and to set our country straight when it comes to climate change.
Oh, I love this optimism. I feel like Debbie Downer. I'm asking these questions. Just going back to these rollbacks, Congressman Huffman, I just wonder, are oil companies taking advantage of them? I mean, have they had a lasting effect even as we speak?
How cynical to think oil companies would take advantage of things that the Trump administration tried to do to help them these past 4 years. Of course, they're taking advantage. And Carol, before I give a more complete answer to that question, let me tell you how honored I am to be part of this conversation with one of my favorite colleagues, Karen Bass. Careful what you wish for, Karen, because your trip to the veterinary hospital at the Marine Mammal Center is going to take you into my district. And we can't let you leave without showing you a whole bunch of other good stuff. So come on up. Governor Inslee, I'm just a huge fan of your climate and environmental leadership. So thank you for everything you've done. And Carol, I wish I could tune into a nightly newscast where you were the anchor. You just have always brought so much thoughtfulness and intelligence to your work as a journalist. So look, whether we can quickly undo some of these rotten things that the Trump administration has done these past 4 years, and bear in mind, these weren't just ideologues in charge of our government these past 4 years. They handed the keys to government to the fossil fuel industry and basically let them do whatever they wanted. So there's a lot of damage that's been done. There's a lot we're going to have to undo. Some of it can happen very quickly. The things that happened under executive order and just sort of policy guidance that issued out of CEQ and other things. Some of it did go the complete process of a rulemaking. It will be harder to undo, but I think we have an opportunity to do it. And then, you know, we really do have a lot of things going for us, including market forces that are making it hard. As much as they tried to revive the coal industry and to do all of these other terrible things, it wasn't enough. Coal still continued to die under their watch, and renewables are thriving. So we've got a lot of things going for us. The last I'll mention is just public opinion, which is the most powerful thing of all. It's on our side here. And I think if we can harness it and get to work, and I agree with the governor, we got to either win some elections or do something about that filibuster, because that's going to really open the door to doing many of the additional things that we know we have to do here.
The legal maneuvering that all of this is going to take, because as hopefully Congress passes legislation or proposes new rules, it's going to be legally challenged by someone. The Supreme Court has tilted further to the right with Amy Coney Barrett, right? So how worried are you about that, Governor?
Well, I have found it doesn't do you a lot of good to worry about things you can't control. So an honest answer, I don't spend a lot of time worrying about that. And one of the reasons is what Congressman Huffman said. Look, we do have the public with us, and you can write statutes that generally can be impervious to Supreme Court assault if you write them in the right way, if you write them in a strong enough way, if you are understanding of a little bit about how to maneuver around the 10th Amendment. So I actually don't think that's the biggest barrier to us. I think the biggest barrier is getting the necessary votes in the US Senate. We're going to have a president who's going to do everything within his power on executive action. We're having increasing state action. And I do want to point this out. Look, states cannot be largely inhibited. 85% of the things we need to do, we can do on a state by state basis. We're doing it at my state. You're doing great things in California and Oregon. So I would hasten to add, if the Supreme Court tries to rein in Congress, we have our states under a preemption or other measure. We have state action that's not preempted. So I'm not losing a lot of sleep over that. We just have to figure out how to get maybe another vote or two in the U.S. Senate to really go 100 miles an hour, and that's the goal. But for those who are out there in this webinar, look, city councils, county councils, state legislators, mayors, governors, we are uninhibited. And we've got now the best 100% clean electrical grid bill in the United States and the state of Washington. We got the best energy efficiency codes in the state of Washington. We will shortly have what I think will be the best transportation initiative in the United States. So, that's why I think we should be encouraged that we all have multiple avenues to fight this, and don't lose any sleep over the Supreme Court.
Still, Congressmember Bass, we're so partisan, and I would love a few senators to, vote for environmental regulations, but I'm sure that most people out there don't have much hope just because we're just so divided. So I'm sure there are teams of lawyers standing by to fight these things, and that is necessary, isn't it?
Well, it's necessary, absolutely, but it's necessary for us to stick with it. and pass the legislation that is needed. It has been great to watch the president come in and do numerous executive orders to try to immediately repair the damage of the last administration. But many of those executive orders, Jared and I need to look at to see how many of them need to be legislation. And I am hoping, and I really believe that it was an anomaly to have a president that was completely lawless and wouldn't follow the law. And so I think it's important that we move to legislate. And I do think that there's a lot of legislation, even many bills that passed on a bipartisan basis that McConnell just wouldn't take up because his sole mission last session was to confirm judges. And we're past that now. And so maybe we can even go back and look at some of the bills that were done on a bipartisan basis. The other thing, though, that is really challenging to us is that when we do work together, it receives very little coverage. And so the complete perception is that we never get anything done at all. And so we also have to figure out how to get around that too, because that adds cynicism to the public because they just figure we're useless.
So Congressmember Huffman, what are those issues that both sides can agree on?
Yeah, so I think that brings us back to the ocean and coastal resiliency, because I think there are opportunities there. I have colleagues on the Gulf Coast, for example, who I think are willing to work with me on restoring some of these coastal habitats, because it does double duty. It's not only important for fisheries and environmental values, but it's a buffer against rising sea levels and extreme weather. And we all know that that's hammering coastal communities. So that's one of the easy places to start. I think ocean health and fishery management may also offer some opportunities for us to work together, because a lot of my Republican colleagues, Don Young in Alaska, for example, we're going to fight about a lot of things, but he wants his salmon fishermen to keep catching salmon. And we want Governor Inslee's orcas to have salmon to eat in Puget Sound. So we just have all kinds of common cause, I think, on some of those issues.
Yeah, and Governor, just to follow that up, you even think the state of Florida, right? They have interest in the oceans because many people make their livelihood off the ocean in Florida. So there's some bright light there, right?
Well, listen, there's one thing that unites all politicians of every party and every age, and that is the joy in spending money. And we have lots of things we can invest in today. Resiliency is one of them. Clean energy research is another. Actual deployment of early stage technologies and startup companies. Transportation infrastructure and green transportation infrastructure. The field is enormous, only limited by appetites. And so this has tremendous bipartisan opportunities and all of these investment opportunities, and they are not subject to ideological arguments. Sometimes you don't even have to mention climate change or its evil twin, ocean acidification, because we can't leave here without talking about that evil twin. But you can get these things done just talking about job creation benefits. And that's the beauty of the work we're doing now, all of us, because everything we're doing is creating jobs. And the more that we can wrap this around the job creation envelope, the more successful we'll be. And that is a unifying thing. So there is opportunities for bipartisanship. And I believe that we're doing a transportation bill, we hope, here in my state. And to make it happen, it'll have to be bipartisan. And I think we're going to do some more things. We have the greenest transportation bill ever in US history we passed 3 years ago. Now we want to do round 2. And I do believe we'll have an opportunity to make that a bipartisan thing. So don't despair.
I'm trying not to. Congressmember Bass, I think that President Biden is trying to do exactly that. He's trying to say, these green jobs mean good things for the economy. We can do infrastructure projects that are different, but still make money for the common people. For people in communities of color who have unique problems of their own, how do you convince them that green jobs are good for their communities and climate change affects them adversely?
Well, see, I don't think that you need to convince people of that. I think that there is a perception that folks in the inner city are not aware of the environment, and I do not think that that is an accurate perception. If you think of inner city areas, one in South Central Los Angeles, and I represent that area where you have an intersection of multiple freeways that were put there. And I don't know about today, considering COVID, but a few years ago, the leading cause of death of Black babies was asthma. That was absolutely related to the freeways as well as to the heavy industry that was in the area. People know they're getting sick because of this. And so what I think, when I think of the inner city area, I also think of coal country in the same way, in the sense that we would like to move past fossil fuels, obviously, but maybe what we need to think about in the future is affirmatively putting jobs to sustain the environment, renewables in those geographic areas. And so within the inner city, shutting down some of those really polluting industries, but not doing what was done in the 70s, which is the heavy industry left and nothing replaced it. And so you have a jobs desert. And so I think that when we're thinking about converting, we need to think about that as well. But there is a vibrant environmental justice movement that I also think is quite evidence that people in low-income communities of color are quite aware of the environment and are supportive of remedies to the conditions that they're living in now.
So Congressman Huffman, along those same lines, I grew up in Ohio, fracking country, right? Very near to coal country. And just like Congressmember Bass said, people are afraid that if you get rid of those kinds of industries, nothing replaces them, and they're just out of luck. And I think that those ideas are cemented in their minds right now. And how do you change them?
I think you do it exactly the way President Biden is setting out to do it. You talk about the opportunity. You commit to putting those concerns and that transition, that economic transition hardship front and center in our plans moving forward. And talk about Ohio and frankly, any place else that has gotten hooked on the fossil fuel economy. It's not that great. It's a boom and bust situation, and there's just all kinds of dark sides to the fossil fuel economy. But guess what's happening in Ohio right now? General Motors is putting the largest battery plant in the world so that it can achieve 100% clean vehicles by 2035 in Ohio. So I think that's how you do it.
I know, I was pretty amazed by that. Governor Inslee, I think that's a hopeful sign. Do I think everybody has bought into it in these communities? Maybe not. Maybe it takes corporate America working in partnership with government to push the kinds of environmental laws that we need and the infrastructure that we need to build. Government and corporate America really do have to become partners in this effort, right?
Yes, they can take a little encouragement on occasion, and it is happening. I mean, look, when GM says, I wrote a book about 10, 12 years ago, and I showed the first electric car on Capitol Hill. And I brought a GM Volt. I brought it on a truck because it didn't have a working engine at the time, just to show it to members of Congress what the future looked like. And I was, roundly guffawed, and people just gave me a hard time about it, said, this is just a toy car. And I said, well, you just wait. Well, GM now, saying all we're going to make is electric cars. This message to everybody who cares about jobs could not be more pronounced. And it is being led by business leaders big time because they understand the future, and it's here. It's not just the future, it's actually here. So the answer is yes, and it is happening not just in producers, but in service-oriented companies like Microsoft has made pledges and Amazon is doing some great work. You can now come see the Seattle Kraken play, actually, our new hockey team in Climate Pledge Arena. It says Climate Pledge Arena right on the top. It's kind of cool. So we're seeing not just the manufacturing industries, but industries across the spectrum. And that is happening. But don't think that it can't be accelerated by good policy and legislation. We still have an inverted and perverted system where we subsidize fossil fuels in this country. And as long as we're subsidizing the thing that's killing us, businesses will continue to make bad investment decisions buying products that are killing us. So we have to right that ship where the market is broken, where we essentially are subsidizing fossil fuels. And that does take policy. It takes measures of pricing carbon. having low carbon fuel standards, having a whole host of limitations on drilling and the like. So we have to help the market make sure that it works, and that is to make sure we're not subsidizing this toxic material.
On the subject of the fossil fuel industry, Exxon and Chevron seem to be bowing to public pressure to act more responsibly, but the financial industry has headed in the opposite direction. Since 2016, 35 banks have funneled $2.7 trillion into fossil fuel companies. JP Morgan Chase is leading the way, then Wells Fargo. There is a decidedly mixed message here. So Congressman Huffman, what can we do?
Well, I think you can, there are other things you can look to for the complete story. Exxon and Chevron are the worst actors in the entire world in their industry. Other fossil fuel energy companies around the world are at least making some good faith efforts to transition to clean energy companies. Not so our two biggest American oil companies. So they're very much out of step, even with their own industry on this. In terms of the financial sector, yeah, they have been underwriting the investment, the lending, all of the things that if it continues under those plans, we're going to cook the planet. We're going to miss our window. But there's also some leadership there. The financial sector said no to financing Arctic drilling. And that's why this recent lease sale in the Arctic Refuge was such a bust, because no one will underwrite it. And increasingly, you see large hedge funds and others, BlackRock, saying, we're getting out of fossil fuel, we're divesting. So there's some encouraging movement there. And I know hope is kind of a narrative we're probing here today. So just to end up on the point that Governor Inslee made, this tectonic shift that you've seen from General Motors, which will have incredible ramifications around the world, didn't exist a month ago. A month ago, General Motors was in litigation against the state of California to try to roll back clean car standards. This is a huge shift, and it's important for all of us to appreciate how quickly this stuff can happen when it finally breaks and it finally moves. I do think the dam is breaking in some really profound ways that are going to help us answer these questions about how you get there.
Congressmember Bass, BP, along those lines, BP has budgeted $6.5 million toward climate policies and would gladly spend more, it says, if there were viable net zero policies to actively advocate for. Will Congress work with big oil on this, Congressmember Bass?
Well, I mean, I think we're always willing to work with people if they're moving in the right direction. I mean, the best way to do it is if there's a partner. But I just wonder the sincerity of that statement right there. You know, at the end of the day, what makes Congress move on issues like this really is about public sentiment. And what we have seen over the last couple of decades is really increasing awareness and all the activism around climate change. It's one of the key issues for young people and has been very motivating for them to turn out to vote. And so I think it's going to be important for Representative Huffman and I to make sure that we deliver so that we can encourage people to continue to be involved. I remember when Representative Huffman and I were in Sacramento. We were there when the first big climate change bill was passed. And, you know, we were told the world was going to end. You remember that, Jared, all the businesses are going to leave California. Well, what happened is that it was a boom for our economy. All sorts of new businesses opened up. And Representative Huffman gave a great example in Ohio, but I think that we need to spend time making sure people know about these examples. The idea that the largest battery plant will be built in Ohio and that is directly replacing jobs. I think we need to do much better at getting the message out and showing people that we can actually bring about change and they can participate in helping us to do that.
Governor, I do think that the younger generation is really into climate change and working to make the planet safer. A lot of them fear the planet won't be here by the time they're ready to have children, and they can be very powerful voices. How can politicians better utilize those voices to create more change?
Well, I turned 70 this morning, so what young is changed in my definition a little bit this morning. So I'm all about youth and empowerment. I think the thing we need to do, those of you who are in my generation, we just have to have a simple message to our children and our grandchildren, which is if you don't vote, you're not in the will. And if we start to lay the lumber down, maybe we'll get some more voter participation. Look, it's all about voter participation. And we know we can do great things both institutionally and personally. If we can all be a little bit like Stacey Abrams in Georgia, we can change the world. Think about what's happened in Georgia and how much this has changed our opportunities to fight ocean acidification from Georgia. So that's the name of the game, is to inculcate these kids that when they're 5, you start training them to vote, because they vote right. They get it. They're smart. They're the ones vested in decades of the future. And that's just a really, really simple message in that regard. Now, the other thing is to, make sure they have educational opportunities in this line too, and make sure they get the right science. We're still working to have a stronger climate science curriculum that we should have, frankly, nationally, so that all of our children get the right science on this. That there's some work to remain to be done on that. By the way, I want to mention when you were talking about financial institutions and investment, right now there is a very strong effort to have disclosure requirements in our financial institutions and our corporations to identify climate change risk. This is a really, really big deal. And anybody on this call, I hope you can engage, talking to your members of Congress, your bankers and others. We have to have disclosure of climate change risk in financial activities by corporations. Once you do that, you now have the leadership of corporations answering to the public on this issue by disclosing the risk they're making by making bad decisions. This is a big deal. And I mention it because it's not very sexy. It's not top of the line, but it's going to fundamentally change how boards think when they make investment decisions. And I hope Janet Yellen and Huffman and Bass win that battle.
Congressmember Huffman, will we win that battle?
Yeah, I think we will. Again, because the public is with us, and that is increasingly manifesting itself in these, shareholder activist efforts and the divestment movement. It's a powerful thing once it gets rolling. And so I think you're just seeing the dominoes start to fall. When that finally happens, that's going to be one of those tectonic shifts.
I want to talk a little bit about the Paris Climate Agreement, because everyone was very excited, Congressmember Bass, when the United States rejoined that agreement. But some environmentalists think, yay, we're back in. But when all is said and done, they call it wishful thinking, and that it amounts to, we all agree there's a problem, but we really don't want to do what it takes to solve the problem. So how excited should we really be about that?
I think we should be very excited about it, but it's not just, obviously it's the Paris Climate Agreement, but I am most excited that the United States is back on the world stage again. I love to hear President Biden say, we are back. And so to me, signing and rejoining the climate agreement is key, but asserting our overall leadership in the world again is absolutely key. Having a coherent foreign policy, making sure that we are leading the way, because over these last 4 years, the world has looked at us and said, we thought you guys were the Rock of Gibraltar. You weren't as stable as we thought. And so our policies have to be in line domestically with what we are going to have, what we are rejoining in the Paris Climate Agreement as well, because I think that the world has looked at us over the last 4 years and said, you guys have a lot of contradictions. There's a lot of hypocrisy there. So we have to show that we are back domestically as well as internationally, and it was a very significant step.
I asked that question in part, Congressmember Huffman, because according to the New York Times, only a handful of the nearly 200 countries that have signed on to the Paris Climate Agreement have met their targets. That's not exactly robust. So what do you do?
Well, look, I think part of the answer to why that is the case is that the U.S. has been missing for the past 4 years. Everybody knew that Paris was the floor, not the ceiling. It was the framework, the skeleton. We were going to have to raise our ambition. We were going to have to get more concrete commitments. All of that was supposed to happen. In fact, I was in Madrid for the last global climate conference where our representatives were from the Trump administration, and they were pushing American natural gas and fossil fuel as the answer, at a climate conference, which was just an embarrassment. So of course you were going to see backsliding. Of course you were going to see the rest of the world not make commitments because the largest consumer economy in the world was on the sideline. We're back. Karen Bass is exactly right. And when we go to Glasgow later this year, I think you're going to see, maybe not the ultimate realization of where we need to be, but you're going to see us back in gear, locking in real commitments. You're going to see great statecraft from John Kerry and others in this administration, and you're going to see progress.
That's good. That leads right into my next question about John Kerry. So Governor, he's the man in charge of convincing our partners that America is reliable. We're back on board. We're pushing like things for our environment. How does he do that? What's his first step?
Well, first off, we got the right person for the job because no one has as much credibility around the world than John Kerry on this and many subjects. So I'm really happy about him stepping up to the plate. Look, it's all about delivery. We just have to show delivery. And when we show delivery, we will be more inspirational to the rest of the world. We've opened the door. If you're in, in Turkey right now and you're asking, is the US really going to do something? You would be very, very impressed with what's happened in the last couple of weeks here, right? Every executive action Joseph Biden has taken has been 100 miles an hour. If I was talking to the ambassador of Turkey, I would say, look, there's nothing that possibly we could have done in the last 2 weeks that the United States has not done under Biden's leadership. So I think that will be helpful in the international discussions to show the pace of the work he's done. And I want to reiterate, I won't even mention it, but there's maybe only one thing that he could have done that he hasn't done. So we got a good record of success here, and I think it will serve us well. And I think we will make progress. Obviously knows Paris is just a start. We got a long ways to go. I will say this since you asked about Paris though, I would say to the extent we spend 5 minutes thinking about Paris in our individual and our political lives, we should spend 5 days thinking about what we're doing in our own communities. If you can convince your city council to buy electric buses for your bus fleet, that might be 1,000 times more impactful for your personal time than worrying about the Paris Agreement in some sense. And the reason I say that is that it's just not members of Congress or governors that can be powerful advocates here. Everybody on this call can be a leader. And I just encourage people to fight these battles in the neighborhoods, in the cities, in the states where we live. We all can move the ball here.
Absolutely. I just want to remind those watching to submit your questions to the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. I'm just about to open it up to our viewer questions. And I now want to focus more on the state of California. Congresswoman Bass, I mentioned that study by the Marine Mammal Center about sea lions getting cancer from toxic chemicals in our waters. I'm sure that did not surprise you. I just want to what are your thoughts on that and what could be done? What should be done?
Well, I think it's absolutely tragic that is happening. And it made me think of the cancer clusters that we have in our communities. People who live near the industries or the freeways, as I've mentioned before. And I think that we need to do everything we possibly can to make sure that all those chemicals don't flow in the ocean, because it is not shocking that is the situation, nor is it shocking as to what is at the root of the problem, where the problem comes from. We know that it's from the chemicals that have gone into the ocean. I did want to comment though about John Kerry, because as the governor mentioned, I couldn't think of anybody except for maybe President Biden who has the respect and the relationships to have a former Secretary of State, to have a former chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Senate, now being the person that is in charge of climate, to go around the world and restore our reputation and lift up what we are doing domestically so that we do not appear to be so hypocritical. I think it really is going to reset the agenda in the right way. I think it's going to be very positive for our country and for the world.
I hope so. Congressmember Huffman, California sets the agenda often for many issues, right? And I would think climate is one of those issues. What in your mind is the biggest environmental problem that California faces today?
Biggest environmental problem. Wow. You know, there's a lot of environmental problems coming at us all at once. Um, I think the biodiversity crisis is one we probably don't talk enough about. It's one of the ways in which climate change is, and also our own development patterns and actions on this planet are going to really have consequences for the long haul. I was pleased to see one of these early actions that the Biden administration took was this 30 by 30 initiative to protect 30% of our public lands and our oceans by the year 2030. That's something that our Select Committee on the Climate Crisis called for. We weren't the first to call for it. There's a movement around the world to do that. But it's an important part of this. We're going to need areas for stressed animals and ecosystems to be able to adapt and recover from climate change. And the ocean is one of the trickiest places to do that because the public sees the ocean and it still looks beautiful and pretty. And you mentioned the sea lions, and you know, our oceans are sick right now. They're really hurting. They have absorbed a huge amount of the impacts of climate change in ways that people don't even see. But it's a big, big deal. And Governor Inslee talked about ocean acidification. Wow, if we let that one spin too far out of hand, you can't get it back. And the implications are just stunning and overwhelming. So that's part of our challenge here, but certainly preserving 30% of our oceans is an important step toward getting it right.
Can I mention something too about our oceans, especially in Southern California? As Representative Huffman said, they are beautiful, but you know what? There's so many days in Southern California when we're told we can't go in the water. And we can't go in the water because the water is toxic. And so I think, you know, we almost take it for granted in the Los Angeles area and don't think much about it. And I think we need to really educate people as to why it is that certain days you can't even go swimming. Another big issue is urban oil spills. In my particular district, I have over 300 oil wells. So a large urban oil field. And we have some oil wells that are right in the middle of neighborhoods where people have absolute physical complaints because of that. People have gotten ill, there's cancer clusters or other temporary impacts. And so shutting down many of the urban oil drilling is an important issue in the Southern California area.
Okay, now I want to pose some questions from our viewers to you guys. This is from Natasha, and this is to Governor Inslee, and she's thrilled to see you here, Governor Inslee. What is Washington doing to handle the massive amounts of trash being generated by the pandemic, i.e. masks, syringes, so that it doesn't end up in the ocean rivers where ocean creatures that are already battling trash live?
A huge question, obviously. We need to go to the source of this, which is to change our packaging and design products for a life cycle, so we don't just go into a throwaway society. And that is a fundamental shift in everything that we make. And so what we're trying to do is to work with business leaders, at least at the moment, to attempt to get them to design things with life cycle costs associated with it. Now, we haven't actually even started to think about how to do that in policy, but we're starting to try to inject this into people's mindsets in the manufacturing process. Starting with packaging, obviously. The packaging is just unbelievable, the waste that we're seeing. We have some business leaders that are doing some good work on that with new investments and new technology. But the bottom line is everything we make, we have to, in some sense, adopt a life cycle analysis of it. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in that regard. Now, obviously, the permitting and the things we do to make sure things are kept out of the water system, I think we're relatively good at that on our land use disposal situations. We have a pretty good regulatory approach to that. But as long as you keep making stuff that's impermeable for 10,000 years, it's going to end up in the water to some degree. And that has to be a fundamental shift. I think we have a lot of work to do on the policy side on this.
Yeah, it seems like we've gone maybe a step back since COVID, right? Because we're doing pretty good with the banning of plastic bags, but now you see them back. And
right.
That's not necessarily good. This is from Barbara Beasley. How can the Marine Mammal Center community best help with these policy changes? Congressmember Bass, do you want to take that?
Well, I think that the advocacy from the center is absolutely critical, and making sure that people have the awareness about policies that are coming up. But your advocacy, I think, is at the center of it. Well-respected institution, well-known. And when you speak to elected officials, they definitely listen.
This is from Bruce Fairbanks. How can we get other countries to engage in the fight to get Congress to pass meaningful legislation so we can make significant progress on improving the global climate to save our planet? Congressmember Huffman.
Well, getting other countries and having Congress pass, those are sort of two things packaged together. And I think they're both really important. Obviously, our public opinion can drive the action of Congress in all sorts of important ways. And we'll try our best. Karen and I will try our best to make some progress there. But in terms of the rest of the world, I think, again, the leadership that we're going to see from this new administration, Secretary Kerry and others, is part of the answer. I think our trade agreements are another important part of the answer. One of the reasons I voted against the USMCA, which was, by some measures, a better trade agreement than we've seen in recent years, even though it happened, under this terrible administration, totally silent on climate. And I don't think we can afford going forward to leave maybe our strongest tool for bringing the rest of the world around on the sideline. Our consumer market is still the thing that everybody else in the world wants a piece of. And the terms in which we allow that to happen are our trade agreements, and climate has to be front and center in every single one of them. So I'll continue to be a no vote, even on otherwise good trade agreements, if they continue to miss those opportunities to wield our most powerful tool.
This is from Azul Hall. How do we make the price of buying an electric car more affordable for people of mid-income or lower income? Governor?
Well, there's a lot of ways to do it. One is a direct subsidy, and we've done a little bit of that in our state. We can do more. We can have financing systems for our transportation networks, which recognize the costs of fossil fuels, which is prodigious, which is still not priced into the price of gasoline and oil, as it should be. So that makes electric cars more affordable. The value of them increases. We can do our electronic charging station infrastructure, which we're doing up and down the I-5 corridor and across I-90 across our state, to eliminate range anxiety, although the range now is in the 250, 300 mile range now. So it's really becoming less of an issue, but still reducing that range anxiety and increasing that corridor with fast charging stations, very important. But direct subsidies of this make sense. Look, these are things that are saving our health, and it makes sense to subsidize that directly, either through our tax code or otherwise, and to get this industry starting, and it's getting there.
This is for Congressmember Bass. What opportunities exist in the current political climate to tie environmental justice to social justice so that we can see mutual progress in both?
Well, I actually couldn't even imagine a better opportunity than we have now with this administration. Opening salvo, one of the first executive orders that the president signed was an order around racial equity and social justice. And so the idea, especially after the last 4 years, but the idea that you have a president that almost on a daily basis references this, whether he's talking explicitly about environmental justice or not, the point is that value of equity and looking at things as to how they're impacting communities differently is at the core of everything the administration does. Who he appointed as the new EPA administrator, I think, is a perfect example, an environmental justice leader from the South, where you have lots of environmental justice activists, a lot of deregulation that has devastated communities. And so I have a lot of hope with this administration. But even with all of that, we have to have the outside activism that continues to raise the issue and creates positive pressure on all of us. Because of all the issues we have to deal with, It's that kind of activism that keeps it front and center to make sure that we get the job done.
Governor, we're hitting the end of our session, so I did want to get this in because I do think COVID has thrown a wrench into the fight for, environmental legislation, and also, for the money that we need to enact these things that will save our planet. I mean, how realistic is it to expect anything really concrete and big to get done during this time when we're trying to pass this big COVID relief package that's in the trillions of dollars?
I think it's very realistic. I feel undaunted by this. And the reason I feel undaunted is, again, coming back what Congressman Huffman said, is public sentiment demands this. We understand the risk. We saw the dam get knocked down in the gorge in India the other day. California is burning down every year. You can't breathe in Seattle because of the smoke from our fires 2 out of the last 3 summers. The public demands this. And when the public demands it, things can happen. That's number one. Number two, the similarities between COVID and the climate crisis are pretty amazing. They're both based on understanding of science. They both are, you can't run from it. They both are fundamentally health-related issues. Climate change is a health-related issue. I mean, we love the orcas and the polar bears, but it's about our health fundamentally. And so they're both health-related issues. Third is my experience is that when you have major moments of tumult and change, you can do big things. And this is one of those moments you can do big things, right? We did really big things in the 30s because we had to. And it is a similar moment with a similar level of crisis that the country and the states are in. So I feel undaunted by this. In my state, we have 2 major bills that I hope to get through this year, a clean fuel standard and another step on green transportation. And I'm not slowing down at all about that. So no, I don't feel diminished by this. I feel invigorated.
Congressmember Huffman, look, Congressmember Bass is nodding, so I know you feel the same.
Well, I do. And the other piece of the opportunity that's wrapped up in this mess is 0% interest rates. And I'm sure Governor Inslee would love to be able to print money in the state of Washington, but they won't let him do that. We can do that in Washington, D.C. We can borrow our own money at 0% interest and really go big in this moment. And when you've got everyone from the Federal Reserve to the Treasury Secretary to, frankly, a whole bunch of conservative economists and even some outgoing Trump administration economists telling us, go big. This is one of those rare moments where you don't worry about the price tag. That's a moment that we can seize on and do big things.
And Congressmember Bass, I would say people are saying, oh, but you have to go so fast. You have to get it done. We have to hurry, because you never know what's going to happen after the first term.
Well, right, but that's still a long time. And I think in terms of COVID, I believe that we will have this relief package passed in mid-March. That's still just 90 days into the new administration. And so I do feel that we have time. We don't have time to waste now. But I also think that in these 2 years, because we also don't know what will happen in the midterms. The midterms historically is when the party that is in power in the White House loses seats. Representative Huffman and I know we cannot lose 1 seat. We have to gain seats in this mid-year, and we also have to gain seats in the Senate. So we will be able to do more in the last 2 years of President Biden's first term. But these 2 years we have now, I think we have time. We have legislation that people have been working on for years. So it's not like we're starting over. And I do think that we can use the COVID crisis to segue into the environment. President Biden is talking about building back better, a major infrastructure package. And so obviously climate has to be front and center in that. And even if we look at the health impacts of COVID, a lot of the really troubling, disproportionate way COVID is impacting communities is because of environmental issues, the respiratory issues that really put poor communities at risk and has been a contributing factor to the disproportionate death rate. That's a part of the public education that all of us need to be involved in as we move forward.
And with that, we end our, it's been so fascinating. I want to turn it back over to Jeff so he can say goodbye to you all, but it's been wonderful. You've been fascinating guests, and thank you so much. Hey, Jeff.
Wow, I am pumped up. This has been a delight and a fascinating discussion. Governor, I'm glad we could have this birthday party for you. Happy birthday to
Thank
you.
you.
That was an extra treat. And want to give a shout out to our friends and colleagues up in your area. SR3 is an organization like ours that is part of this vast network. Any point on the coastline of this country, there's going to be an organization like ours that has the marine mammals back. So SR3 is our good network partner up in your area. And oh my gosh, I was just scribbling as I was listening to the three of you, the narrative of hope, the statement, we're back as a country. How can you not be inspired? How can one listening in on this not take away the motivation and the commitment that we all share? And it's the leadership of individuals like yourselves that is such a wonderful compliment to, and you all made these remarks, the individuals who are sitting at home and thinking, what can I do? What can I do? And you went from the international right back down to the local and the actions one can take right in their own community, right in their own household. And we're advocates of that kind of thinking as well. This is the kind of thing that inspires us to do our work. We are committed, we are dedicated for the long haul to be the best stewards we can be of marine mammals and the ocean home that they occupy. And the last couple of comments were really about this one health concept, right? That it's not just the health of the orcas or the salmon, it's human health as well. And we see those ties all the time. So thank you for the shot in the arm, no COVID pun intended, but thank you for the inspiration. And with that, we're going to be closing this. So Governor Inslee, Congressmember Bass, Congressmember Huffman, thank you so much for your leadership and your hard work and for joining us today. And Carol Costello, thank you for the great guidance through this discussion. Please know we've got more questions queued up in front of me right now than we could possibly answer. This is going to be fuel for continuation in this webinar series. So we look forward to seeing many of you again. And with that, we will close this session. Thank you.
We get them.